They say that the best horror stories come from real life. Well, here's one of them. It was just another rainy assignment for Aria. She was a city journalist who'd covered every type of story imaginable. Floods, fires, even riots. But this one promised to be different. This time she was traveling to a village nestled deep in the heart of India's Western Ghats. It was renowned for a single terrifying legend. Every monsoon season, without fail, someone would vanish from the face of the earth, swallowed whole by the unforgiving hills. Arriving at the village, Aria found it draped in a thick layer of fog and despair. Villagers huddled together in doorways, their faces etched with worry. They tried to dissuade her, warning about the approaching full moon and begging her to postpone her stay. But their pleas fell on deaf ears. Armed with her notepad and a flashlight, Aria pressed on to the outskirts of the village, where an old, dilapidated bungalow stood silently watching over the valley below. She was met by an old man with eyes as deep and dark as the forest itself. He handed her a key. His gnarled hands trembled as he whispered, "Here, do not turn on any lights after midnight. Whatever you hear, do not open the door if you hear knocking." Then he disappeared back into the gloom, leaving Aria alone with the house and her mounting apprehension. Night descended upon the village like a shroud. The wind picked up, whipping against the walls and whistling through the broken window panes. Heavy drops of rain began to slam against the roof. Soon, the feeble structure was enveloped by a howling tempest. Fear coiled in Aria's stomach, squeezing tight with each gust. Then suddenly, the lights flickered and died, plunging her into absolute darkness. A low moan echoed through the rooms, sounding like the wails of the damned. Was it the wind or something more sinister? The old man's warning echoed in her mind. Do not turn on any lights after midnight. She checked her watch. 11:45 p.m. The storm seemed to reach a crescendo. Rainwater dripped steadily from the ceiling, each drop drumming like a tiny hammer blow on her frayed nerves. Outside, the wind screamed, a symphony of chaos. Then she heard it, a knock. Light, hesitant at first, then growing bolder, more insistent, like footsteps pacing closer and closer. The old man's second warning blared in her head. Do not open the door if you hear knocking. Aria sat frozen, listening intently. Another knock. Then a pause. Then another knock. This time louder, more urgent. Her mind raced. Was it just the wind? Or were there really malevolent spirits prowling outside, their icy fingers tapping on the glass, waiting to be let in? She strained to listen, holding her breath, her entire body tensed. Suddenly, the knocking stopped abruptly. Silence descended once more, heavier now, more profound, amplifying the pounding of her own heart. Minutes ticked by, each one stretching into an eternity. Just when she started to relax, ever so slightly, the knocking began again, this time closer, more insistent than before. Panic tightened its grip around her heart. Should she investigate? What if it was someone in distress? But the old man's warning echoed in her ears. Whatever you hear, do not open the door if you hear knocking. Outside, the storm raged on, a relentless assault of wind and rain, blending with the persistent knocking to form a cacophony of fear. Just when she couldn't bear it any longer, the knocking ceased. Exhausted and terrified, Aria decided to seek refuge in the bedroom. Maybe she could sleep and hope that whatever was out there would move on to a less occupied abode. As dawn approached, the storm began to subside, leaving behind a world washed clean by the torrential rains. The knocking did not resume, but the silence that followed was more deafening than any storm. When the sun finally peeked through the clouds, casting long fingers of light into the room, Aria cautiously made her way to the door. Peeking outside, she saw no one, only a set of muddy footprints leading away from the house. But what truly caught her attention was the direction they were heading. They circled the bungalow, childlike, slowly, gradually making a complete circle. Had she really been trapped in a house surrounded by a ghost child all night? How had those footprints gotten there? Was the child still out there? What was it doing? With a mix of dread and morbid curiosity, Arya decided to follow the tracks. They led her through the tall grass and across the yard until they stopped abruptly at the edge of a gaping well. For a moment, Arya hesitated. What if the old man had been right? What if the knocking hadn't been a spirit, but a desperate plea for help? Slowly, she leaned over the well, peering into its dark depths. The storm had left the water murky and opaque, obscuring the bottom of the well. But as she stared into the inky blackness, she thought she saw a pale hand emerge, clutching onto a faded blue cloth. Hesitantly, she lowered herself towards the well. "Hello," she called out, her voice trembling slightly. There was no reply, only the sound of dripping water. Gathering her courage, Arya reached out, trying to grab the hand. It withdrew quickly, disappearing back into the dark water. But then it emerged again, this time accompanied by a small, dusty face. "Help me," the child whispered, her voice raspy and weak. Terror shot through Arya, freezing her in place. The sight of the ghostly apparition, pale and translucent, her eyes wide with despair, sent shivers down her spine. Yet Arya's fear was overshadowed by an overwhelming surge of empathy. With newfound determination, Arya scrambled to find purchase on the slippery well wall. She hauled herself up and stumbled onto the overgrown ground. She rushed to the well, desperately trying to peer inside. The storm had passed, but the skies remained overcast, the air heavy with moisture. But it was the footprints that truly held her attention. They were small, dainty even, and they circled the well. As she traced the path, a strange sense of familiarity washed over her. Arya felt a sudden urge to search the area more thoroughly. She moved aside the weeds and debris, revealing a patch of soft, moist earth. And there, half buried in the mud, lay a faded blue cloth, intricately embroidered with flowers. Carefully, she brushed off the mud, revealing a pair of small shoes. They were intricately stitched, their uppers a faded blue, matching perfectly with the cloth she'd seen in the well. With trembling hands, Arya continued her search. She moved aside clumps of dirt and tangled roots, her gaze fixed on the ground before her. Suddenly, her fingers brushed against something hard. It was a doll, small and porcelain, dressed in a blue velvet dress, the same shade as the shoes and the cloth. The doll's face was beautiful, her eyes painted a striking blue, but it was the position of the doll that truly caught Arya's attention. It was lying on its side, as if it had been thrown into the well purposefully. A chill ran down Arya's spine. Could this be the spirit's lost doll? And why had it been tossed into the well? Overwhelmed with a sudden surge of determination, Arya turned her attention back to the doll. Gently, she lifted it from the ground, cradling it in her arms. The doll felt strangely cold, as if it had been taken from a grave. As dusk began to settle, casting long shadows across the land, Arya made her way back to the bungalow. She carried with her the weight of unanswered questions and the chilling premonition that the Spirit S story was far from over. She found a small, leather-bound journal on a table in the corner. Its pages were filled with faded ink, the writing dated decades ago. The journal belonged to the bungalow's previous owner, and as Arya read through it, she discovered a tale of love, loss, and lingering sorrow. The story revolved around a young girl named Amina, the daughter of the house's former owner. Amina, a bright and cheerful child, loved playing by the well in the backyard. But one particularly heavy monsoon season, while chasing after her doll, she slipped and fell into the well. Despite her father's desperate attempts, he could not save her. Her body was never recovered. Years passed, but her spirit, it seemed, refused to find peace. The journal claimed that Amina's spirit was forever bound to the bungalow, searching for her lost doll and yearning for the living to acknowledge her pain. As Arya read these entries, she felt a deep sense of sadness wash over her. This wasn't just a story. It was a tragedy that had unfolded within these very walls. And it seemed that the spirit of young Amina was still here, trapped between worlds, unable to move on. Driven by compassion and a desire to put this restless spirit to rest, Arya made a decision. She would find Amina's doll and return it to her. But the question was, where could it be? The answer, as it often does, lay in the most unexpected of places. While clearing the overgrown bushes near the well, Arya noticed a faint sound. It was a melody, a haunting lullaby. The sound of the singing drifted through the air, beckoning her closer. Following the music, she found herself in the center of the backyard. And there, standing beside the well, was a small, translucent figure. It was Amina, her eyes downcast, her shoulders slumped. In her hand, she clutched a faded blue cloth. And as Arya watched, Amina raised her head, revealing a face of profound sadness. "Help me," she whispered, her voice echoing with despair. Arya responded, her voice soft yet firm. "I want to help you, Amina, but I need your help too." Slowly, cautiously, Amina turned her gaze back to the well. Understanding dawned on her pale face, and she nodded, her form shimmering with gratitude. Gently, she laid the cloth down, revealing a small porcelain doll. It was the same doll Arya had found buried in the mud earlier. With a final nod, Amina faded from view, leaving behind the doll and a profound sense of peace. As lightning illuminated the sky, Arya noticed something peculiar. Amina's footprints, which had circled the bungalow earlier, now led directly to the well and then vanished. In the days following her encounter, Arya returned to the village to check on the old man. She wanted to tell him about Amina and her discovery, but she couldn't find him anywhere. The villagers, too, seemed unaware of his whereabouts. One evening, as the monsoon clouds began to gather once more, Arya sat in the bungalow, sipping hot tea. The wind howled outside, but now it sounded different, almost mournful. Suddenly, the sound of laughter drifted in from the yard. It was the tinkling laughter of a child. Cautiously, Arya stepped outside. The storm had passed, leaving behind a fresh, earthy scent. And there, beside the well, she saw it. A small, blue-clad figure was skipping merrily, a porcelain doll in her hands. The girl paused, turned, and with a final wave, she vanished. In the distance, Arya heard the old man's voice. She finally rested. "Good. Not all who knock mean harm."